Okay, we're gonna do a quick set of questions here. I know it's late on the East Coast and even later in Europe, so I'm gonna keep the Q&A segment really, really short. But I'll ask maybe 3 questions to our panelists here. Maybe I'll start with you, Brad. Some reviewers have asked, given your experience both within crypto and with more traditional tech companies, do you think that existing tech companies will adapt to the decentralized systems that are being launched, assuming some of these networks take off? For example, is there a world where instead of Twitter being replaced by a decentralized alternative, that Twitter really adapts to a decentralized network, or even itself becomes one? I know you've put a little bit of thought into like the intersection between Web 2 and Web 3, and curious how you think about those problems.
Yeah, if that happened, it would be the first time that it ever happened. And one of the great things about being in the venture business is you get to watch the first time a lot of things happen. So maybe it will, but it has never happened historically. And I think that that it's an enormous challenge for an existing business with an existing business model, a culture, an organizational structure to make that transition. And that's why it's so much fun to be in the venture business, is because when you have these moments where you have a significant platform shift, you often see a Cambrian explosion of new innovation that the incumbents have a very difficult time reacting to. You look at somebody like Jack Dorsey, he's, pretty, he's a bit of a Bitcoin maximalist, I guess, but he's at least involved and engaged in crypto. And you see him pick up on something like Mike Masnick's piece, Protocols, Not Platforms, and then follow it up by trying to get something started with Blue Sky. All of that feels like he's trying, but he's working against a lot of organizational momentum. So I think the good news for entrepreneurs is that this is going to be an open field. It also means, as both Ryan and Olaf have said, we have to have a little bit of patience.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Olaf, you've clearly had a front row seat in how Ethereum kicked off its development and its ecosystem many, many years ago, and how that kind of progressed for many years in the future. And I'm curious how you think elements of the Filecoin ecosystem are similar or completely different from how you saw the Ethereum ecosystem evolve.
Oh, that's interesting. I think that ecosystem building it's sort of a compounding thing. So it's not necessarily like exponential, but it's accelerating at an accelerating rate. So I think if you were to go back to 2015, 2016 Ethereum, it would feel really quiet relative to what it is today, where I think we would all agree it's almost impossible at this point to genuinely keep up with everything being built on Ethereum. Like, the pace of development is way beyond any mortal's ability to keep up with all of the different applications. So I think, I do expect a similar sort of compounding with Filecoin, where it'll be pretty easy for the next year to track, like, generally, like, the big projects, what's happening, what businesses are getting funded. And then at some point it'll get out of our hands, and we'll have to just sort of hold on as best we can and try to make sense of what'll be, I think, a really dynamic ecosystem. So I think it's also like developers leading the way, right? So where you see developers' interest is where you see the big businesses of tomorrow. And so I think Filecoin has a lot of developer interest today. So that, to me, has always in crypto been sort of the leading indicator.
Awesome, fantastic. Ryan, you mentioned, what you would want to see happen in order to catalyze kind of a consumer vision for the future of Filecoin, where someone can easily switch from Dropbox or Google Drive or something else. I'm curious how you size up, like, what do you think the first opportunities for Filecoin from a storage perspective might be? Is it consumer, is it enterprise? And what would you need to see to have confidence that those will take off from a tooling and an adoption perspective?
Yeah. So the question is whether it's consumer or enterprise. I think the answer is yes, right? And uh, it, it will require from the ecosystem uh, a dedicated group of people chasing after both categories and many subcategories in between. And so I mentioned that, pinning services that allow people to pay with credit card rather than have to have crypto natively or Filecoin natively in order to make payments, I think would be really nice. But then at the same time, uh, just a community-led group out there evangelizing and communicating to enterprise how they can lower their overall storage cost and how that's meaningful for their bottom line, I think is a compelling message that will resonate with corporates moving forward. And so I don't think it's one or the other, and I don't think it's necessarily like one for first and then the other. I think it's going to require a range of experiments and attacking from all sides.
Awesome, fantastic. I'll ask one more open-ended question. We'll cycle through folks really quickly here. Let's say this community were to come together 3 years from now, call it Filecon, hopefully not during a pandemic where we can meet in person. What would be the one top thing that you would hope that the community would be celebrating that the Filecoin ecosystem has achieved in those 3 years? And I'll put, let's say I'll put Olaf on the spot first.
So I'm like a sucker for just totally new, unprecedented stuff that sort of boggles your mind. So my hope is that in 3 years, if we were talking, that something has happened that I truly have not thought of and could not imagine today. That would be my number one hope.
Awesome. Brad?
So I'm going to just say ditto, but I'm going to actually frame it a little bit by saying the thing that blew me away about DeFi was composability. That I never anticipated the possibility that somebody over a weekend could put together 2 or 3 different protocols and produce a completely different consumer-facing service. And I am curious about the possibility of what composability looks like on top of Filecoin. And I'm not an engineer, so I can't even begin to understand what the challenges there would be. But if somebody is able to assemble over a weekend multiple protocols to produce something that nobody's ever seen before, that would be the thing that I'd be most excited about.
Awesome.
I would like to see and celebrate that a minimum of 4 of the top 10 smart contract or other blockchain ecosystems store their state on Filecoin or on IPFS, and do away with this very silly narrative that they must store their state within their own chain, otherwise, there's an attack vector and so on and so forth. It's just much more pragmatic and much cheaper and much simpler, and the integrations are available, and there's really no reason not to just outsource storage to Filecoin. Blockchain generally is really the ultimate manifestation of Smithian economics, where there should be specialization among sort of regions or categories, and then trade among them. And it's fairly obvious that Filecoin IPFS is best positioned to lead storage, and other ecosystems and other chains can lead other things, and then they can do trade with one another. And so, Vitalik has spoken in the past about potentially having the Ethereum state on an IPFS hash, and I think that that's totally normal, and we should get back to that being a goal for the general ecosystem.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much to Brad, Ryan, and Olaf for engaging with the community today, especially in this extremely brutal time zone for many of you. We really appreciate it, and we're so excited to continue the journey on the development of this protocol together. So thank you very much.